Good. I think we are good. So here, because y'all can probably hear the popping from my cola. Some good stuff. Some good stuff. Okay, I'm trying to, I lost a little something. I'm trying to figure out where it went. All right. So, open this up here. All right. Remember, today's many conversations with God. So we are on chapter, whatever chapter are we on? We're on chapter 7 of the first book, book 1. When I'm done with this one, I don't know if it's with this one or with the next one, but when I'm done with the first book of the series, it's either this or if I'm done with the next chapter for A Course in Miracles, then I'm going to take a break from one of them and then I'm going to start going over the other book that I discovered that I'm really excited about as well. So that's what I'm going to do with that. So that's what this is about. All right, so let me get myself comfortable. Okay, so let me put on my glasses so I can, my eyes don't hurt. Okay, so All right. Excellent. All right. So for those of you tuning in, remember, this is our study group time. So we are on the book Conversations with God. We're on book 1. We're on chapter 7, page 99 of the big book. I don't know if it's the same page on the smaller book, but it's definitely the bigger book. So we got this going on. So for those of you tuning in, wanting a personal reading, that was earlier today, so that's done. So there will be no personal readings today, but I am open to questions regarding the subject material, the content that we discuss in the book, and or just spiritual questions in general. I'm open to those, and I'll try to cover some of those or go over some of those before I get off here. Okay, so for those of you who haven't been following along, the Conversations with God book series is written by Neil Donald Walsh, and this is a guy who kind of struggled with a lot of things in his life, and he just got really tired and frustrated one day after having gone through so much, and just started writing in his journal. And as he wrote in his journal, he just went on like a bitch fit, and he wrote, and just almost talking to God in a way. And as he was doing this, at some point when he asked a question out of sheer desperation, he got a response back in an internal voice in his mind. And so he started to have this dialogue with the voice in his mind, and he calls it God. So Conversations with God. And so he's having this conversation or dialogue with God. It's a very fascinating series. There's a movie as well, but the movie isn't about what's in the book. The movie is just simply about his story and how he ended up writing this entire series that ended up becoming like a bestseller and actually has done very well across the globe and has been translated to all these different languages. But he is a very well-known spiritual teacher now, and people would not even know that maybe, 20, 30 years ago, he was homeless on the streets of Dallas and Houston. Like, that's where he went from after losing everything to building himself back up, and then just getting frustrated, having this conversation with God, and then this turning into a big national bestseller or international bestseller. So as I'm reading through it, the part that is Neil, I'm going to say his name and then I'll read it. And then the part that is God, I will say God and then I'll read that part. So that's pretty much how it's going to go. So chapter 7. Neil, life is so scary and so confusing. I wish things could be more clear. God, there is nothing scary about life if you are not attached to results. Neil, you mean if you don't want anything? God, that's right. Choose, but don't want. Neil, that's easy for people who don't have anybody depending on them. What if you have a wife and children? God, the path of the householder has always been a most challenging path, perhaps the most challenging. As you point out, it is easy to want nothing when you are only dealing with yourself. It is natural when you have others you love to want only the best for them. Neil, it hurts when you can't give them all that you want them to have. A nice home, some decent clothes, enough food. I feel as though I've been struggling for 20 years just to make ends meet, and I still have nothing to show for it. God, you mean in terms of material wealth? Neil, I mean in terms of just some of the basics that a man would like to pass on to his children. I mean in terms of some of the very simple things a man would like to provide for his wife. God, I see. You see it as your job in life to provide all these things. Is that what you imagine your life to be about? Neil, I'm not sure I'd state it that way. This is not what my life is about, but it sure would be nice if this could be a byproduct at least. God, well, let's go back then. What do you see your life being about? Neil, that's a good question. I've had a lot of different answers to that throughout the years. God, what is your answer now? Neil, it feels as though I have two answers to that question. The answer I'd like to see and the answer I'm seeing. God, what's the answer you'd like to see? Neil, I'd like to see my life being about the evolution of my soul. I'd like to see my life being about expressing and experiencing the part of me I love most. The part of me that is compassion and patience and giving and helping. The part of me that is knowing and wise, forgiving and love. God, sounds like you've been reading this book. Neil, yes, well, it's a beautiful book on an esoteric level, but I'm trying to figure out how to practicalize that. The answer to your question that I see being real in my life is that it's about day-to-day survival. God. Oh, and you think one thing precludes the other? Well, you think esoterics preclude survival? Neil, the truth is, I'd like to do more than just survive. I've been surviving all these years. I notice I'm still here, but I'd like the struggle to. Let me repeat that. But I'd like the struggle for survival to end. I see that just getting by from day to day is still a struggle. I'd like to do more than just survive. I'd like to prosper. God, and what would you call prospering? Neil, having enough that I don't have to worry where my next dollar is coming from, not having to stress and strain just to make the rent or handle the phone bill. I mean, I hate to get so mundane, but we're talking real life here, not the airy-fairy, spiritually romanticized picture of life you draw throughout this book. God, do I hear a little anger there? Neil, not anger so much as frustration. I've been at the spiritual game for over 20 years now, and look where it's gotten me. One paycheck away from the poorhouse, and now I've just lost my job, and it looks like the cash flow has stopped again. I'm getting really tired of the struggle. I'm 49 years old, and I'd like to have some security in life so that I could devote more time to God's stuff, to so evolving stuff, etc. That's where my heart is, but it's not where my life allows me to go. God, well, you said a mouthful there, and I suspect you're speaking for a whole lot of people when you share that experience. I'm going to respond to your truth one sentence at a time so that we can easily track and dissect the answer. You have not been at this spiritual game for 20 years. You have been barely skirting the edges of it. This is not a spanking, by the way. This is just a statement of truth. I'll concede that for 2 decades you've been looking at it, flirting with it, experimenting now and then, but I haven't felt your truest commitment to the game until just recently. Let's be clear that being at the spiritual game means dedicating your whole mind, whole body, your whole soul to the process of creating self in the image and likeness of God. This is the process of self-realization, about which Eastern mystics have written. It is the process of salvation, to which much Western theology has devoted itself. This is a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, moment-to-moment act of supreme consciousness. It is a choosing and a re-choosing every instant. It is ongoing creation, conscious creation, creation with a purpose. It is using the tools of creation we have discussed and using them with awareness and sublime intention. That is playing the spiritual game. Now, how long have you been at this? Neil, I haven't even begun. God, don't go from one extreme to the other, and don't be so hard on yourself. You have been dedicated to this process, and you're actually engaged in it more than you'll give yourself credit for. But you haven't been doing so for 20 years, or anything close to that. Yet the truth is, how long you have been engaged in it is not important. Are you engaged in it now? That's all that matters. Let's move on with your statement. You asked us to look where it's gotten you, and you describe yourself as being one step away from the poorhouse. I look at you and see a quite different thing. I see a person who is one step away from the rich house. You feel you are one paycheck from oblivion, and I see you as one paycheck from nirvana. Now, much depends, of course, on what you see as you pay and to what end you are working. If the object of your life is to acquire what you call security, I see and understand why you feel you are one paycheck from the poorhouse. Yet even this assessment is open to correction, because with my pay, all good things come to you, including the experience of feeling secure in the physical world. My pay, the payoff you get when you work for me, provides a great deal more than spiritual comfort. Physical comfort, too, can be yours. Yet the ironic part about all of this is that once you experience the kind of spiritual comfort my payoff provides, the last thing you'll find yourself worrying about is physical comfort. Even the physical comfort of members of your family will no longer be a concern to you. For once you rise to a level of God consciousness, you will understand that you are not responsible for any other human soul, and that while it is commendable to wish every soul to live in comfort, each soul must is choosing its own destiny this instant. Clearly, it is not the highest action to deliberately abuse or destroy another. Clearly, it is equally inappropriate to neglect the needs of those you have caused to be dependent on you. Your job is to render them independent, to teach them as quickly and completely as possible how to get along without you. For you are no blessing to them so long as they need you to survive. But bless them truly only in the moment they realize you are unnecessary. In the same sense, God's greatest moment is the moment you realize you need no God. I know this is the antithesis of everything you've ever been taught. Yet your teachers have told you of an angry God, a jealous God, a God who needs to be needed. And that is not a God at all, but a neurotic substitute for that which would be a deity. A true master is not the one with the most students, but one who creates the most masters. A true leader is not the one with the most followers, but one who creates the most leaders. A true king is not the one with the most subjects, but one who leads the most to royalty. A true teacher is not the one with the most knowledge, but one who causes the most others to have knowledge. And a true God is not one with the most servants, but one who serves the most, thereby making gods of all others. For this is both the goal and the glory of God, and his subjects shall be no more, and that all shall know God not. Back that up a second. Let me read that again. For this is both the goal and the glory of God, that his subjects shall be no more, and that all shall know God, not as the unattainable, but as the unavoidable. I would that you could this understand. I will that you could this understand. Your happy destiny is unavoidable. You cannot not be saved. There is no hell except not knowing this. So now, as parents, spouses, and loved ones, seek not to make of your love a glue that binds, but rather a magnet that first attracts, then turns around and repels, lest those who are attracted begin to believe they must stick to you to survive. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be more damaging to another. Let your love propel your beloveds into the world and into the full experience of who they are. In this will you have truly loved. It is a great challenge, this path of the householder. There are many distractions, many worldly concerns. The ascetic is bothered by none of these. He is brought this bread and water and given his humble mat on which to lie, and he can devote his every hour to prayer, meditation, and contemplation of the divine. How easy to see the divine under such circumstances. How simple a task. Ah, but give one a spouse and children. See the divine in a baby who needs changing at 3 a.m. See the divine in a bill that needs paying by the first of the month. Recognize the hand of God in the illness that takes a spouse, the job that's lost, the child's fever, the parent's pain. Now we are talking saintliness. I understand your fatigue. I know you are tired of the struggle. Yet I tell you this, when you follow me, the struggle disappears. Live in your God space and the events become blessings, one and all. Neil, how can I get to my God space when I've lost my job? The rent needs paying, the kids need a dentist, and being in my lofty philosophical space seems the least likely way to solve any of this. God, do not forsake me when you need me most. Now is the hour of your greatest testing. Now is the time of your greatest chance. It is the chance to prove everything that has been written here. When I say, don't forsake me, I sound like that needy, neurotic God we talked about. But I am not. You can forsake me all you want. I don't care. And it won't change a thing between us. I merely say this in answer to your questions. It is when the going gets tough that you so often forget who you are and the tools I have given you for creating the life that you would choose. Now is the time to go to your God space more than ever. First, it will bring you great peace of mind, and from a peaceful mind do great ideas flow. Ideas which could be solutions to the biggest problems you imagine yourself to have. Secondly, it is in your God space that you self-realize, and that is the purpose, the only purpose of your soul. When you are in your God space, you know and understand that all you are now experiencing is temporary. I tell you that heaven and earth shall pass away, but you shall not. This everlasting perspective helps you to see things in their proper light. You can define these present conditions and circumstances as what they truly are, temporary and temporal. You may then use them as tools, for that is what they are. Temporary, temporal tools in the creation of present experience. Just who do you think you are? In relationship to the experience called lose a job, who do you think you are? And perhaps more to the point, who do you think I am? Do you imagine this is too big a problem for me to solve? Is getting out of this jam too big a miracle for me to handle? I understand that you may think it's too big for you to handle, even with all the tools I have given you. But you really think it's too big for me? Neil, I know intellectually that no job is too big for God, but emotionally, I guess I can't be sure. Not whether you can handle it, but whether you will. God, I see. So it's a matter of faith. Neil, yes. God, you don't question my ability, you merely doubt my desire? Neil, You see, I still live this theology that says there may be a lesson in here somewhere for me. I'm still not sure I'm supposed to have a solution. Maybe I'm supposed to have the problem. Maybe this is one of those tests my theology keeps telling me about. So I worry that this problem may not be solved, that this is one of those you're going to let me hang there. You're going to let me hang here with. God, perhaps this is a good time to go over once more how it is that I interact with you, because you think it is a question of my desire, and I am telling you it's a question of yours. I want for you what you want for you, nothing more, nothing less. I don't sit here and make a judgment, request by request, whether something should be granted you. My law is the law of cause and effect, not the law of will see. There is nothing you can't have if you choose it. Even before you ask, I will have given it to you. Do you believe this? Neil, no, I'm sorry. I've seen too many prayers go unanswered. God, don't be sorry. Just always stay with the truth of your experience. I understand that and I honor that. That's okay with me. Neil, good, because I don't believe that whatever I ask, I get. My life has not been a testimony to that. In fact, I rarely get what I ask for. When I do, I consider myself damn lucky. God, that's an interesting choice of words. You have an option, it seems. In your life, you can either be damned lucky or you can be blessing lucky. I'd rather you be blessing lucky. But of course, I'll never interfere with your decisions. I tell you this, you always get what you create, and you are always creating. I do not make a judgment about the creations that you conjure. I simply empower you to conjure more, and more, and more, and more. If you don't like what you've just created, choose again. My job as God is to always give you that opportunity. Now you are telling me that you haven't always gotten what you've wanted. Yet I am here to tell you that you've always gotten what you called for. Your life is always a result of your thoughts about it, including your obviously creative thought that you seldom get what you choose. Now, in this present instance, you see yourself as the victim of the situation in the losing of your job. Yet the truth is that you no longer choose that job. You stopped getting up in the morning in anticipation and began getting up with dread. You stopped feeling happy about your work and began feeling resentment. You even began fantasizing doing something else. You think these things mean nothing? You misunderstand your power. I tell you this, your life proceeds out of your intentions for it. So what is your intention now? Do you intend to prove your theory that life seldom brings you what you choose? Or do you intend to demonstrate who you really are and who I am? Neil, I feel chagrined, chastised, embarrassed. God, does that serve you? Why not simply acknowledge the truth when you hear it and move toward it? There is no need to recriminate against yourself. Simply notice what you've been choosing and choose again. Neil, but why am I so ready to always choose the negative and then to spank myself for it? God, what can you expect? You were told from your earliest days that you're bad. You accept that you were born in sin. Feeling guilty is a learned response. You've been told to feel guilty about yourself for things you did before you could even do anything. You have been taught to feel shame for being born less than perfect. This alleged state of imperfection in which you are said to have come into this world is what your religionists have the gall to call original sin. And it is original sin, but not yours. It is the first sin to be perpetuated upon you by a world which knows nothing of God, if it thinks that God would or could create anything imperfect. Some of your religions have built built up whole theologies around this misconception. And that is what it is, literally a misconception. For anything I conceive, all that to which I give life is perfect, a perfect reflection of perfection itself, made in the image and likeness of me. Yet, in order to justify the idea of a punitive God, your religions needed to create something for me to be angry about, so that even those people who lead exemplary lives somehow need to be saved. If they don't need to be saved from themselves, then they need to be saved from their own built-in imperfection. So these religions say, you'd better do something about all of this and fast, or you'll go straight to hell. This, in the end, may do nothing to mollify a weird, vindictive, angry God, but it does give life to weird, vindictive, angry religions. Thus do religions perpetuate themselves. Thus does power remain concentrated in the hands of the few, rather than experienced through the hands of the many. Of course, you choose constantly the lesser thought, the smaller idea, the tiniest concept of yourself and your power, and to say nothing of me and mine. You've been taught to. Neil, my God, how can I undo the teaching? God, a good question and addressed to just the right person. You can undo the teaching by reading and rereading this book over and over again. Read it until you understand every passage, until you're familiar with every word. When you can quote its passages to others, when you can bring its phrases to mind in the midst of the darkest hour, then you will have undone the teaching. Yet there is still so much I want to ask you, Neil, sorry. Yet there is still so much I want to ask you, still so much I want to know. God, indeed, you begin with a very long list of questions. Shall we get back to it? And that's the end of that chapter. So let's stop there. So really, really great stuff. This is like the hardest part for people to grasp, because the moment that you accept the reality of the fact that we are God in form and that we are great and that we have so much power and potential, and then once, not only do you realize it and it becomes integrated into your being, you also will start to have experiences that continue to reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it without even asking for those experiences. Because the moment that I realized the truth of what was, or the knowledge and awareness of what I'm sharing with you, because everybody has their own truth, but I was floored because I felt completely cheated out of a different reality to start with. But I think it was important because in that, instead of giving into the fear and anger, which is what we teach, right? Don't give into just the fear and anger. Yes, you can have an experience of it. You're human, but don't give into it. At the same time, that's not what we're here to experience. And instead of me getting angry and feeling cheated further and just going into that or buying into that, I instead said, you know what? How can I use this? How can this benefit me or the people that I'm going to connect with? And so I look at all of the trauma and the suffering that I've endured in my life as a way to teach someone something valuable about themselves. Because if it's going to do anything, if I am going to take something dark and painful and transform it into something built and understood from a perspective of love, I have to use it. I have to use that experience, that knowledge, that wisdom. I have to use it in a gesture of love and compassion for someone else, which is why I transform that experience into a teaching, into an understanding, into an example of what I learned from reading the words of the masters and the teachers that have come before me. And so that's what I would say is, when you begin to look at what you have experienced with value and look and dig for the value in it, shift the way it's been affecting your life, so that instead of it being a master turning you into its slave, you instead turn the understanding and the teaching and what's gained from it, turn that into a creation and an expression of love by the divine mind. That's what you do. And so there's a shift around. Now, it may not happen overnight. You may not be able to turn everything you've endured into something like this right away, but it can be transformed. It can be changed. It can be turned into something of value and in a gesture of love and furtherance of the creation. So that's why I try to use everything that I've gained. And even if I still struggle with some things that I've gone through, I try to switch it. Like last year for me wasn't an easy year for me either. I think most people had a rough year last year. But for me, last year was a rough year because it forced me to confront elements and aspects of my own nature and personality that I wasn't prepared to deal with, that I wasn't prepared to encounter. And I had to face it and either embrace it in love and acceptance and allow it to exist and be, or fight against it and try to bend myself into something that I wasn't authentically and genuinely. So instead, I decided to just embrace the reality of who I really was and then use it as some sort of way to teach people or to make a point into teaching a valuable lesson in something. So let's go through the questions here as far as like the study material. So personal questions I'm skipping, guys, because this is our study group hour. So for those of you who have a question regarding the material or the study group or just the spiritual context of our conversation, I'm open to. So I'm going to look through here to see if... Yeah, Cassidy. And this is, Cassidy's like, ooh, you haven't gotten what you wanted, but you got what you called for. That stings a little. Absolutely, 100%. Everything that we experience in our lives, we are co-creators in the experiencing of it. We're the co-creators and the co-witness. The co-creators because we are the elements and the aspects of God in form, creating the scenario and contributing to scenarios and adding to energy with others. We are the co-witnesses of it because we are also the witnessing aspect of God. God knows all things because God is all things through us and through everything. So that's why we think that way. Yeah, it was hard. I like when I started teaching people that you're responsible for the life you've created and experienced, you're responsible for. And it's hard for people to move that because immediately people want to associate the trauma that they've endured with the idea of victimhood. If I went through all these traumas, then I have an entitlement to be a victim. No, you don't. You have the experience and the gaining of these experiences, you've gained from that. That is all yours. You own that. You own the trauma. You own the suffering. You own what you have been through. But that doesn't mean that you are allowed to remain a victim outside of the direct experience, because in doing so, you have submitted to what has been done against you, or what has been how fear has infected your life, or trauma, all of that lower energy, you've submitted to it. And so to call yourself a victim or to even relate to the victim mindset aligns you with more victimization, aligns you with more experiences in that. And so you've got to shift the trajectory of your experience and not let it consume you and turn you into a dark personality, into a pained and miserable personality, because you feel so attached to that. Because in life, sometimes, and I will say this, some of us will use our suffering as a trophy. I've gone through this, that's my trophy. No, it's not. You own the rights to that experience because it's yours. You claim it, you own it, but to own it is to become master of it and wield the benefit and the gain and the value that it holds, because there's a reason it happened. Even if it was a miscreation, even if it was an unconscious manifestation of your state of mind, doesn't matter. You still own that experience. You still get to use it to your advantage and use it to benefit others as well in the process, because to gain from trauma and to give to others in love, again, it is the repeating experience of divine being. That's what it is. My partner and I on the walk today, we were having a conversation about gay men and how he was very upset and outraged because he had seen a post by someone who, this was like a teenage white girl who, these youngins I think it started with the youngins who were completely raised from the internet, because I remember back when I had to wait for the dial tone and then I had to dial in and hope that I got through just to get into the internet, and everything took about a minute to load, and you wait to hear you got mail. Or for those people who couldn't afford AOL because they couldn't pay for the service, they had the free mail, which was Yahoo, before Google existed, because the Yahoo was the way to go. And then of course we had Internet Explorer back in like school on the computers. So the internet was another resource, like the library. The internet was another resource for us. It wasn't a lifestyle. And so I think in the late 2000s, early teens, I think that's when we hit the internet being a lifestyle, where you have entire, youngins who are completely, like, their entire life has been based around the concept of social media and the internet being a norm. And it is not a norm. It's only been an experience for, a small fraction of the population for the last 10, 15 years. Most of us older folk, we don't have to spend every minute on the internet. I still have people who, when I'm walking on the trails, they stop and they ask for directions, and they've got their cell phone in their hand. And I'm just like, use your map, use your map app. But they've got it written down on a piece of paper. Like, it's because it's still the mindset that I don't have to use my phone for everything, or it has the ability to do this for me or do that for me. So you have these youngins who don't understand the struggle that some of us who didn't have the luxury of the internet when we were younger had. Because, I honestly didn't start having the ability to have access to the internet until I was around like 12 or 13. And for most people, because that's when it started to become mainstream and everybody was buying a Hewlett-Packard computer or a compact computer with a big old boxy screen, and the speakers are attached to the side, if you could afford the speakers. So back then, we gay folk, especially gay men, we didn't have a community other than going to a bar or club, which is where the gay scene was at. It wasn't just about clubbing and, having anonymous sex. People went there because they just wanted to be in their community. I went to a gay bar many a times, or club many a times, not because I wanted to go and have sex in the bathrooms or anything like that, because that's the illusion of the gay scene, but I wanted to just be around people that I could relate to, people that I was going to feel safe around. And it was just something different, right? It was something new. And in my side of town, which is the east side of Houston, where it was predominantly Hispanic at that time, old Catholic Hispanic neighborhoods, Second Ward, Magnolia, all of that, Lawndale, all of that, there wasn't a way for me to connect to anybody like myself. And if there was someone like me, they were scared and they didn't talk about it. And so that, I had to endure my own fair share of trauma as a gay man. To this day, I go to a bathroom, I still have anxiety and stress by going into a public men's bathroom because of the trauma I endured as a child with all of the incessant bullying and teasing and being beat up and all that. So you have that for the rest of your life until at some point, it drops off. But they don't understand the trauma and all of the experiences we had to endure. And so my partner was talking about how this little white girl who's like a teenager was like going off and saying that gay white men think that they are the epitome of the gay community and they represent everybody in the gay community and they've been given more attention and more focus, etc. And so she was going off about that and how comparing gay white men to Nazis, right? And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like this little foolish little girl. So my partner was upset because she's like, she doesn't have the right to monopolize the suffering that we've endured in the LGBTQ community. And, she said, and he's like, it's not right. You don't have the right to come up and say from your privilege, your position of privilege, stop using your suffering or your trauma as a trophy. Stop using it and there's a difference between using your experience to propel change and to cause transformation and owning it because it is what you went through and it gave you a sense of empowerment. That's one thing. And I think this applies to a lot of different people. This applies to Black people in America because no one gets to take that suffering away from them. No one gets to take that collective, conscious, cultural trauma away from them. That is owned by the people in this country because of what their ancestors had to endure. And that has carried over and over, and it carries in the genes and in the blood and all that. Same thing with gay males as well. Same thing with people of a different nationality, etc. So it goes across the board, and it is across the board. And so this little white girl who is entitled doesn't have the right to take away the gain because they don't understand the perspective, or because they don't have to live in a world where that's an issue or that's a norm for them, and that's because of what was built on the backs of people like myself and the gay community that came before me, who busted their ass and had to deal with rioting and stuff to bring things about. So, these younger, it's the same thing. When you think of black folks, these young black kids who their parents busted their asses either getting themselves through high school, getting themselves through college when they got no financial assistance. They didn't have the luxury of having parents who had money to just put them to school. There were a lot of black folks in this country who did not have that right or ability because of the cultural norms and because of the perpetuation of racism. And so no one has the right to go up and say, you need to stop using what your ancestors did. Y'all are not slaves. That's the same bullshit, right? And so that's the problem, is that these younger people do not have respect for the wisdom and the suffering that was endured and gained by the people that came before them that brought about positive change. It's one thing to be a victim and do nothing with that suffering and have done nothing to change this world from that. It's another thing when you have endured, the value of what you've gone through, you can own that, and you have used it to shift and transform the culture or the norms or the opportunity for less suffering for those after you, which is what has happened now. You have straight guys who can go and wear fingernail polish. My ass would have been busted up in high school if I wore fingernail polish to school. So that wasn't something I had the luxury of experiencing when I was young. So there's something to be said about the people who struggled and really did a lot of work to build the rest of us up. And so we have to give people their due. People paid their dues. They earned it. And so this guy, when Neil was talking to God about, I've been doing this for 20 years. That little girl on the internet could say, I've been doing this for 2 years. All my life I'm like, girl, you are 2 cents to the dollar. You're fresh out of the paper mill. What are you talking about? And that's the way that's about. No, if you really have put in the work and the effort, then your life would exemplify it. It would show it. It would be present in obvious ways. And you would have failures that you could say, I did this and I failed miserably at it, but I did this and it worked for me. So you can have that to show for it. And so when he's talking to Neil, I've done this for 20 years and I'm just so tired of suffering. I'm so tired of just really pushing myself and nothing has happened and nothing has worked for me. And that is bullshit, because I know from direct experience that everything that is talked about in this book works. Why? Because I came from the hood, was raised on food stamps, and I had to build myself up. And in my direct family, I am the most successful person of the batch. And everything that I learned spiritually that I do now by experience, by example, I taught my middle sister, and she was able to do exactly the same that I was able to do with the exact same approach to things. And so it works, but you have to understand it. Because here's an example. I knew someone who wanted to be a singer, and they kept talking about themselves as being this famous singer. And I was like, girl, what are you doing? If you want to be a famous singer, why are you only getting together with people and singing once a month? And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, if you cared about the actual singing and if you actually felt passion for it, you would be doing this shit every freaking day. There's an interview with what's her name? There's an interview with Linda Ronstadt, and she says, if you really want to be good at what you do, you sing every day. She says, I sang 6, 7, 8 hours a day every day, working on pitch, working on tune, working on control. And so that's what I did. When you look at people like Selena, when you can hear her voice towards the end of her life, she spent 20 plus years practicing that skill and getting control of it and passionately doing it well. And so that's Beyonce falls into the same category. If you look at some of the videos of her, she's been singing and telling people how to sing since she was a little girl. I saw a video, she was like, what, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and she was with a bunch of the other girls that were, I think, with the beginning of the Destiny's Child back in the first level of it. And she, they were practicing singing in the living room, and she stopped and said, okay, when you do this, and she was telling the little girl, when you do this, you need to go like this, and she was teaching her at that age. So that's passion. That's intention. That is giving it everything you got. And so some of y'all who call yourselves like entrepreneurs, I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, well, what business have you had? Well, I don't really have a business. You ain't an entrepreneur. Well, I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, well, what have you done to take an action and a step to fulfill your obligation in manifesting this desire, this dream? Well, I get together once a month with my girlfriends and we talk about, like how we can build ourselves up and we have to be there for each other as women, etc. I'm like, okay, that has nothing to do with your business. What the hell have you done for your business? Well, I ain't done anything. Well, then you're not an entrepreneur. Stop calling yourself something you ain't even trying to be, because you ain't trying to be it. In that once a month you get together with these girls, why aren't you spending that time working on your business or taking your ass to the courthouse and or to the city and getting your DBA with your company name on it? That's a reality. That's creating something and bringing it into reality and following through with faith. That's what that is. And so that's how it works. You have to follow through with faith, but there has to be inspired action that leads up to it. And it has to be a combination of, I'm thinking about this, I'm passionate about this, I feel this in like the depths of my soul on a regular basis, and I'm not feeling it like I'm thinking about it and obsessing and dreaming about it. Dreaming about something is not passion. Dreaming about something is not passion. Dreaming about something is noticing where you're at, what you're doing, not liking it, wishing it was different, and then dreaming about the opposite. That's what a dream is. That's not passion. Passion is, ooh, that sounds like I can do it. Okay, what's my plan? And then throwing yourself into the actions and into the momentum that is going to come up when you do anything that has to do with that dream. That is passion. And then thinking about it often and feel like not being able to take a day off and not think about a spiritual lesson or not think about a spiritual master or not think about a grand teaching that you have, which is exactly what I do with literally a day does not go by. I literally spend my off days researching and reading and studying spirituality and thinking about new concepts and drawing and sketching everything that comes to mind. Like I literally have a book full of these sketches, and which is going to be part of a book that I'm working on. But that's the passion. That's it. And I'm spending everything that I've got on this. And so I respect it. I have respect for what I do. I respect myself, but I have respect for the work that I do, my work ethic with this, because I know that I did not dismiss or disrespect God when I said, I'm going to do my part. I know what I didn't do, and I didn't respect the divine and the manifestational forces of this universe. I said, let me do my part. This is my part. This is my part, which means I miss some days I miss sleep because I stay up too late working on stuff. Sometimes I am not out there partying because I'm at home editing videos, or I'm reading material that I feel is going to be very important to share with the masses. That's passion. That's passion. You get to enjoy your time off when you've done the work and you've paid your dues. You don't get to just go and party hard and then put in a little bit of effort. It's got to be a little bit of a better balance there. Okay, so let me go up here. And by the way, guys, the book, oh my God, at this point, I think I've got 12 or 13 books lined up in how I'm going to do it. And the energy has been building up for this for the last couple of years, really seriously building up. And so I've already done it several times where I begin the process and then something just doesn't continue. And so I wait until I feel another push. It's almost like giving birth. You can feel it come and you're like, okay. And then it settles and you're like, okay, well it didn't come out yet. so that's how I feel with this book. So I've got it's actually going to be a big ass thick book, but it's going to be it's going to be 13 smaller books that actually create the big book, because I don't want to wait till I'm done with the big book to put stuff out there. I want to start throwing stuff out there and doing it so that once I'm done with the 13th book, I can put them together and then I have a big book. So it's all tied into the same thing. But with each book, everyone is going to cover a specific topic or thing that we deal with our human experience, etc. And the first one just covers my story and talks about psychic ability and mediumship and how to best understand that process in the mental conceptual mind, and also the pieces and all the things that go along with it. It's going to be very like technical in a way, but I have to put it out there because I'm sick and tired of all this, like, think of your angels and like pray to the higher realms and you'll receive a message. I'm like, no, bitch, like this is brain power. I'm using brain power. I'm having to figure this out in my mind. So there are mechanical mechanisms and processes in my brain that are occurring, and I want to break it down for people so that if I die right after I make that first book, then at least I did that, and at least I may have contributed in some very powerful way to changing the preconceptions and the misunderstanding about psychic ability and how this works. Because I seriously mean it when I say every single person, all of you can do exactly what I do and better. And that is my job, is to make you better than I am so that you can be a next level version of what I've been able to do. And so that's what the book is aimed at. If I were talking to myself back when I was a kid, this book would have changed my entire life and I would have started way earlier doing this work. But I didn't have enough of a teacher, and I didn't have enough to help me understand it. Now I get it. I totally get it. I've spent enough time and energy experiencing this and breaking it down and understanding it in pieces that I'm like, okay, this is going to be super complex and people may not completely get every piece of it, but at least people can start to use this as a premise to do more of it in a much more professional or in a much more effective way. Because again, like, praying to just the angels for psychic ability is not the way to go if people don't believe in angels. And everybody can use this, whether they're a believer in faith or they are just a scientist in nature. Okay, so let me go through here because I'm like going into a complete spiral of Ferny-isness. So let me go through here and see what you guys are asking about the glass isn't half empty or half full. It is refillable. I think that is what God is saying. Every single day we recreate our lives. And if I had a really, really fucked up day today, tomorrow I can completely like create a new experience and I don't have to repeat the same cycle. The problem is that people, when we go through a suffering or a challenging experience, we end up obsessing about it, and all we do is think and worry. And all of that thinking and worrying is affecting you at your core, and it starts to materialize in your reactions and your emotional responses and your emotions, and also actions you start to take, you take out of a place of fear or a retractive place. And that's what ends up perpetuating the cyclical pattern. I think Red Robin, she's like, so if you hold the power, that is why the meek shall inherit, I think. So let's talk about that for a second, because a lot of people are like, the meek shall inherit the earth. And so when you actually go back to the Gospels and you go back to the time frame and the history during that period, during that time, the Roman army had the Roman civilization had invaded ancient Judea and that entire region. And that region for a while was, I guess, free. You can consider it free. And then a family came along and just kind of took it over. And then they kind of messed up some things. And then they were pushed out. And then they were free for a little bit after that. And then the Romans came and took over and said, hey, we own your property and we own your yard and we own everything in it. And if you try to say something about it to us, we're going to kill you. So we own your house now. We own everything that you have. And now you have to pay us taxes or you're going to be punished by death. That's what the Romans did. So during the time of Judea, all of the Jews at that time were sick and tired of having to deal with all of the oppression from all of the different cultures that they had to deal with. Now, that's not to say that the Jews didn't have their own problems, because they definitely had their own problems. I mean, there was a lot of infighting as well. They were even killing themselves in the process in some instances. But they in today's day, they would have been seen as terrorists by the Romans. And so the Romans were trying to squish that as often as possible so that they would kind of force the Jewish people to submit and become subjects of the empire. And so the Jews were ready to get these assholes out and was like, we need to get rid of these people. Or they need to get out of here. Not only that, but at that time, there was a lot of gentrification happening. The Romans had kind of taken over the area, and they started to influence a lot of the culture and beliefs in that area as well. Sepphoris, which was one of the closest, Sepphoris is the city, the Roman city that was, I think it was Jewish origin, even though it was renamed in this Roman. But anyways, it was the closest city to Nazareth. So it was like literally 4 miles away from Nazareth, I think. So the people of Nazareth would actually like travel to Sepphoris to get work, because it was like they were day laborers, and so they would travel there to get work. But they were sick and tired of all these people who were the wealthier Jewish citizens in that area who were just collaborating with the Romans and going along with it. They were becoming rich in the process. And then also the temple, which is the temple, like back when you went to that time frame, the temple was the only temple, and it was where God existed. And the priests who supported the temple would always receive their bounty from all of the people who would show up in hordes, constantly spending their money at the market to purchase animals for slaughter for the sacrifices that they would have. And so the priests would always get that money, and then they would always pay Rome as well. So at that time, when Jesus was going around preaching that, which he may not have even said that, but when he was preaching and talking about the meek shall inherit the earth, which is, I think it's a little bit differently, the original saying, but it's basically saying that the people who are wealthy are going to get brought down, and they're not going to be able to experience the love of heaven or the greatness of heaven in the same way that the poor people can, because of who they are being in this moment as these wealthy citizens, completely ignoring the fact that all of these people have been subjugated and turned into slaves. And so he was speaking about the wealthy and the people at the top who were receiving benefit by coordinating with the Romans, including the priests. So he was very pissed off about that, because he was like, these people have God, they have a monopoly on our God, and they are speaking as if they speak for God, but yet they do not do what they tell us to do. They are financially benefiting from them, and all of these wealthy Jewish citizens are collaborating with the enemy who has taken over and occupied our territory. And that is not okay. It is unacceptable for us as the poor to be treated in this way, or for those of us who are on the bottom to be treated this way. And so the meek, at some point, the meek shall inherit what the wealthy have. And so he's talking about a balancing and a complete reversal of the order at that time. You could interpret it as a spiritual message for the centuries to come, but he was in context was speaking about what was going on at the time when all this was happening in Judea. So chili pineapple. Okay, so a few things that you say really interesting here. So I completely understand what you are saying, because I am awake. My question is, how do you inspire others to understand that their environment and circumstances isn't the reason why they are in the situation that they are in? And so here's the thing about that. And I'll say two things about this. One is, you got a lot of people going around saying, I'm woke, I'm woke, I'm woke, I'm awakened, I'm awakened, I'm awakened. A true master never has to state it. It is quite evident and obvious from the moment you engage and interact with their energy. As soon as you approach or engage with the master, they don't have to announce themselves, I am this. They don't have to. They just are. And it is the love and the wisdom just literally is like falling out of their asshole. That's how powerful that level of awareness and self-being is. So that's one thing. So I would say to you is, don't worry about letting other people know that you're woke, because they may not see it, they may not understand it, and the people who are meant to receive the benefit of your wisdom, you will never have to tell them that you're woke. You will just exemplify and express, and they will get it. They will get it. And as a person who is aware on that level, we no longer try to focus on changing the minds or the attitudes or the perspectives of those who are not ready. That is like me trying to teach a concept about psychic ability to a little bird flying around. If it doesn't have the capacity in its state of being to receive that knowledge and awareness, then why am I wasting my time as a master of wisdom giving it to that thing, to that being, when it is not ready? Doesn't mean that it's bad or it's lower or it's worse than. It just isn't there. And in this reality and in all of creation, there will always be the beginning and the end, because the beginning of all things and the end of all things was not a moment in time or in existence. The beginning of all things and the ending of all things is an experience and cyclical pattern that never ends, which is why we will have souls or beings we consider souls who may not grasp some of the more complex spiritual challenges and concepts, while we also may have individuals who are masters without title, and they get it, and there really isn't a lot to say to them because they get it from the get-go. So I would say don't waste your time with the people who do not ask for the help, because it is a waste of your energy and wisdom and teaching. And I can say this because that's one of the hardest lessons I've had to learn. Not trying to change the minds of those who just cannot comprehend or receive what I have to offer. And that doesn't mean I'm better than them. It just means I understand something that is very unique and that is very, very much the benefit of my experience in life. And I own that. That's mine. I own that. I went through that. I earned my credits and I did the work. And I am trying to exemplify what I know. So for me, it's like I'm going to focus on the people who really want to learn or want to gain what I have to offer, just because I want to share. The whole point of me being here in this form, in this lifetime, is to share. And so I want to share. I'm not going to go and share with people that is a waste of time to share with. Sarah, do I meditate? I don't meditate in the traditional sense. There are different forms of meditation. My meditation for me is walking. When I walk and I connect with nature, and when I connect with the sky, and when I feel the energy of Mother Earth, like for me, that's a form of meditation. That's a way for me to meditate. A lot of people may not realize this, but I do vape. I vape a few times a week. And I actually vape sativa because I enjoy it to the benefit of my creativity, meaning that sometimes when I'm trying to grasp certain conceptual things from a spiritual perspective, from a very human grounded, oh my God, I gotta make that appointment to go get my shot, that can interfere with the vastness of universal consciousness, because it holds us to this human state. And so sometimes when I walk, it's a freeing effect. It allows me to release, and then I get into a state of mind and being that connects me with my God source, with my God being. For me, sativa also helps with that as well. Not so much as helping me to connect, but it helps me to conceptualize and to understand things from that perspective. I also read. Reading for me is meditation, believe it or not. I do art sometimes. That's meditative for me. Sometimes sitting in this room and staring at the landscape is meditative for me. My partner will tell you I'm very good at just zoning out. And he says, he's like, you're just like your mom. You'll sit there and you just stare into nothing. And I was like, yeah, I know. I was like, I think it's a consciousness thing, because I'm not actually sitting there doing nothing. I'm going through a whole lot in my brain, but my body just stops to really do anything. It's just standing there and I'm staring, and I will stare and stare, not even blink. And it's just because I'm totally in my head. I consider that a form of meditation. So I do sometimes like to practice complete checkout meditation, which is I try to do a little bit of sensory deprivation. So I'll put plugs in my ears. I'll wrap this light out thing around my head, and I'll sit and I'll breathe and I'll just let myself be. And I can do that for 5 or 10 minutes. But it's boring, because I feel like I'm not contributing to anything here. And I'm like, God, I'm only going to have so much time here. Do I really want to sit here for 3 hours trying to be still? Or do I just wait till I'm dead and be still then? And then I can focus on what I need to do to add to the world, or to give what I'm here to give. So it just depends. Recharging battery for me is just my days off. I give myself a good amount of time off when I'm not working. And so I definitely have the opportunity to recharge. Scrammeling. Easy to feel like the world owes you something when you're in the victim mentality. Exactly. Yeah, it feels like because we, in that moment, when we're going through a victimized experience, it feels like we've lost something, right? It feels like something's been taken away or something's been reduced within us. It's an internal mechanism that happens. We feel reduced in some way. And so the immediate reaction is going to be, this isn't right. I am deserving, or I deserve to have what I've lost. And so someone owes this to me. That is where the mindset goes. And that becomes a cyclical mindset. But instead, if you say to yourself, this is painful. I don't enjoy this. I don't care for this. I don't want to experience this, but it is. It is. What do I need to do to feel better? Sometimes it's just crying. Sometimes it's just releasing in some emotional way. Once you have that release, what can I do with this? Because I don't want this to add to me feeling broken. What can I do with this? And then that's when you begin to shift it. But that takes time because you have to integrate the lesson beyond the suffering and traumatic experience. And that takes a bit of time to grasp. And that's why people stay in relationships as long as they do. I know a lot of people who are, they're hanging on to that man and it's been 25 years. He might come around. He might change. He might do something one day and just be a better person. And I'm just like, he doesn't owe you anything. What? I've been with him for 25 years. What do you mean he doesn't owe me anything? He doesn't owe you anything because you kept yourself in that relationship for 25 years. And so you continued to sit there and victimize yourself by subjecting yourself to the bullshit of that relationship. And then you blame that person for it. And then you make them responsible for the debt. You're the one responsible because you chose every day to stay in the relationship. So he owes you nothing. You're owed nothing. And that is so hard for some people because the minute I say they don't owe you anything or they don't feel like you feel, if I feel love towards you, you should feel love towards me. If I love you or I am in love with you, you should love me back. Like that's just, I am giving you my love. It's valuable. It's worth something. I should get that. But no, sweetheart, they don't owe you love back. There's nothing owed back to you. If you love and it's genuinely love, you love without expectation in return. That is that is authentic, genuine love. Love with limitation, love that is based in the idea that you should be loved to feel valuable or to feel worth something, or you should, etc. That is what you're talking about. You're manipulating love and using it as a weapon. But love is not a weapon. That is out of fear. That is actually fear-based obsession. That is romanticizing a potential. That's what that is. So they owe you nothing. You chose to stick with it for 25 years. You're responsible for getting yourself into it, for holding yourself there. You're responsible for digging yourself out, dig your ass out. And the first step is in acknowledging the reality of the situation that it is taking you so long to realize. That's the first step. The second step is, what do you need to do to support yourself? What is it that you need to do to nurture yourself? What do you need to give yourself that you've been intentionally, at that point it's intentionally depriving of yourself all these years? What do you need to give yourself? Okay, good. Give it to yourself. Start giving it to yourself. And then so forth and so forth. So it's a process. It's a process. So I'm thinking of, let's see. And I'm about to get off in a few moments because I'm past my time. So it's just how do you inspire a community that is infested with drugs, prostitution, and mental illness? How is that your problem? That's my question. How is what is going on in the community your problem? Because it isn't. It isn't your problem. Your problem is not and honestly, that has nothing to do with you. Whatever's going on in the community has nothing to do with you. I am a spiritual teacher, and I teach spirituality, and I teach spiritual understanding and such, but I haven't made myself responsible for the entire spiritual community, because the community is what it is. And so even though I'm a member of it, I'm not necessarily trying to elevate or change the spiritual community. I'm not trying to change any particular community. I am just allowing myself to be the purest, most authentic, most grandest version of myself that I can potentially step into, and then share that with the world. And those who need to come to me, and this is one of my mantras, I say this on a regular basis: God, send me the people that I can help or that I am to serve and who can serve me, and everybody else, send them away. And that is what it is. And so that's my mantra. So people come to me because they are being summoned, and I am here to serve. And at the same time, many people do not realize that many of my greatest students have taught me the greatest lessons. And so I never underappreciate those opportunities to serve in this way. And so don't worry about the community, because it's not your problem. The community has nothing to do with you. And if someone wants to spend time on drugs, if someone wants to do prostitution, that's on them. That's their choice. That has nothing to do with you individually. And especially if it's like connected to your family or connected to your friendships, those are reflections of who you are. There's a reason why I am not, all the way in Houston. There's a reason why I don't spend as much one-on-one time with family members that in the way that I used to. Not because I don't love them or because I don't care about them, but because their mindset and the way that they are as people is a very different thing than myself. And so there are people in my family that I've really lost touch with over the years, just because it isn't a reflection of what I choose to sustain in my life on a regular basis. That doesn't mean that I'm saying you're not good enough for me and I don't have nothing to do with you. It's just that they live from a very different reality than I live from. They live from a very different reality, and I respect that. That's their choice. That's who they choose to be. It is when they come looking for you and ask you to help them understand what you are doing, that is when you are summoned to do the work. How does one become awakened? That's a very good question. There are actually several awakenings. There isn't just like one awakened. People think, oh my God, the minute that I'm woke, like there's going to be rainbows and butterflies and unicorns coming out of everybody's butthole. No, that's not the reality of the situation. Being awakened doesn't mean that all of a sudden I'm no longer subjected to human trauma and human pain and human suffering, and that I no longer have to deal with that and I have to rise above it. No, that's not what that means. What awakened means is being consciously aware, and it starts with the self. And there are several layers and levels of awakening that happens for an individual. I actually talk about this in one of my videos on my YouTube channel. If you go over there, I speak about it. It's like a 5 or 6 minute like little lecture that I give, but I break down the 3 layers and levels of awakening, because I believe there are 3. And there's the first level of awakening, which means this is not what I thought it was. Then what is it? And who am I in all of this? That's the first layer of awakening. The second layer of awakening is when you realize that things do not really matter, and that the accumulation and that the titles and that the fame and the fortune, all those things don't matter. That doesn't mean that you won't have that or that you can't still achieve those things. It just isn't a priority at that point, because those things they don't represent value, real true value and worth in this world. They're just a currency. They're just a resource. So there's a level of, oh my God, I have all of this ability to manifest or to produce and create. I want to manifest a car. Well, then you're not, you're only woke like so much, girl, because you literally, like, I just gave you the power of God and you wanted to create a car. You use the power of God to create a car. Like, how woke are you? So that's the second layer or level of awareness and of awakening. The third level is when you realize that you are truly God and that you are a part of the creation process. You are a co-creator. You are a co-witness to all of creation. And so in that, there is a title that becomes apparent to you, and that title shows up as a passion, shows up as an opportunity to rise up to, shows up as a situation to share or to connect in a much more deeper, much more integrative method with all of life. And so when you get to that point, you realize that you're not here for you. You're here for all of this. You exist for all of this. And so that's a completely different shift in perspective. And that level is not the easiest to maintain or to sustain, because it requires of you to still engage with the human experience while also sustaining this higher, more objective, more wiser, more aware state of being. And you actually get really sensitive at that point, because being around suffering is very painful, and you become even more sensitive to it. So it's a lot more contrasting. It's almost like if you're cold and you stick your hand or your finger in hot water, it's going to be much more intense of a reaction. But when you're in warm water and it gets hot, you're not going to notice it as much, because it's a part of your reality. And that's what happens with people at the different levels that they exist at. And so someone who is truly in a much more heightened state of awareness and unity of source with God, then they are much more sensitive to some of the lower levels. They're more sensitive to the suffering in this world. And there's much more of a desire to reduce it. Because as you become God, you desire to love and reduce suffering, because that is the core of our being in source. So that's what tends to happen there. But all right, guys, I am done, because I've got to get to getting in. I got to get to dinner. So I love you all. I'm going to be back. When is Easter? Can y'all tell me when Easter is? I'm going to look and see. I'm going to wait for y'all to respond, because I don't even know when Easter is. There's a book that I want to read. It's actually the Gospel of Mark, and it's one of the earliest versions of it. And it's really interesting. And the translation has been, what I would say, adequately updated, so that it makes sense to the time and in context with what was going on at that time. Thank you, April 4th. So I want to read the Gospel of Mark as our next study group thing. I actually might do, this is going to be next week. So next week. So I think I'm going to do that, because I think it would help us to start to connect with a much more human, authentic, historical version of the master that we know as Jesus. And you can think of Jesus as anything else. Most people are like, what is Jesus' last name? Oh, Jesus Christ. His last name is no, Jesus Christ is not his last name. Christ is a title. And the title Christ is actually referring to another word, which means anointed, the anointed one, which is referring to another word. So it's not Jesus Christ. They actually didn't have last names at that time. And back then, it was like Mexico. You know how there's like Jose's and Juans all over the damn place? Back then, Jesus literally was the Jose or the Juan name all over the place. Mary, same thing. Maria, so same thing. So it's just a very different experience. But it'd be interesting. I want to read that. And so I might take a break from the two study group books that we've been doing, and then I'm going to do that, and then we'll come back. And that's just in honor of people who want to really have an experience with authentic wisdom taught by the person that we all know as Yeshua. So, all right, guys, I love you all, and I will see you next